He's butchering a chicken breast as we speak.
And Kavanagh QC became the people's star.
Getting ratings was important to John. He actually would say, well, I want shows that people like to watch. It's the public that matter to me.
We thought he was lovely.
One of our favourites.
One of our favourites. Anything he's in, I'll watch.
He was a good actor, he was all right.
He always just came across as being a very sort of casual bloke.
His manner, polite, or everything.
His versatility.
He was just totally believable in everything he was in, I think.
He had a common touch about him, no matter what part he was playing in a way. And I mean, I say common touch, I mean, I think it was a universal appeal. I think he could appeal to the working class as well as the middle class, as well as the upper classes.
People thought of him as a man, that he'd been through the mill, that there was something about the street about him.
He makes mistakes, and I think that's quite sort of appealing.
His vulnerability that went with the tough guy side of him.
He was an actor who oozed humanity.
He had deep goodness in him, and a tremendous sense of fun and responsibility, all hidden in this wonderful flower.
Integrity, strength, conviction, and truth.
An honesty which sort of cut through any bullshit or any kind of fashion.
A nun wrote and said he was without side and without conceit.
John was a very remarkable actor. I mean, an extraordinary actor.
The camera certainly loved him.
I mean, his eyes are fantastic.
Well, I think there are other actors around the world who have a very special quality as John did. People like Spencer Tracy.
I said to him once that a friend of mine had said that he reminded him of Spencer Tracy, and John said, I wish.
There was something inaccessible about him, something you couldn't quite reach. So I think as an audience, you were constantly drawn to the mystery of this man.
John was born in 1942 in Stowell Street, West Gorton, Manchester. It was a street that all the Thaws lived in fact. I lived there with John, my father and mother. Next door we had my gran and granddad. Further up the street was my Auntie Beat and Uncle Charlie. So the street was very much a Thaw neighbourhood.
And he was a lovely, happy little boy, because his mum was there then. And it was in and out, and you never knew where he was, you know. He was always with me.
Mum and Dad decided they wanted something better, so we came here to Burnage, Manchester, at this house, number 4 Daneholme Road. It's a Manchester Corporation house. It's flat, there's an upstairs and a downstairs, and we had the downstairs. And it was a beautiful home, a happy home. We had gardens front and back, which for them days was, to us, unbelievable. But eventually, Mum decided she wanted to go.
I mean, I always had this theory that perhaps she had the same kind of starry talent that John had, and to be a woman with that kind of personality in that era was very difficult. You know, you were very frustrated, stuck in a council flat, looking after 2 kids. I mean, you know, I'm not excusing her, because I do think she did damage him.
Dad got me and John together, and he said, now, boys, Mum's gone. There's only the 3 of us. So we've got to make the most of it, and let's just all pull together, and that's going to be life from now on.
When John's mum left, he was only 7, and Raymond was 5. And his dad was on long-distance lorry driving at the time. So John sort of took over Raymond in a way, and my brother left it with the lady above to make sure that they were up and had a breakfast and everything before they went to school, and make sure they were in at night if my brother wasn't back.
John was left with all the cooking during the average day. The average day, I've got to admit, was a little bit rough, but we survived, and one of our favourite meals in them days was the old tin of beans and sausage, which was a favourite of ours. And even a few years back, we in London together, We treated ourselves to a tin of beans and sausage for old time's sake.
They came to us a couple of times a week, then all weekend. But I used to go up with, one day I'd take pea and ham soup up in a pan.
I mean, his childhood was spent, you know, among a group of, within a wide family network. But the core of that family was his father, whom he loved very, very deeply, and his younger brother Raymond, whom he felt he was responsible for and had to look after.
And he told me a story once about how he got Ray dressed up in his best clothes, and he himself, and I think they were about 7 and 5 or something like that, and they went round to where they knew their mum was and knocked on the door, and I don't know whether he actually asked the mother to come back, but their mum gave them a sixpence and said, you know, no, I can't come. Now, I'm sure she had her reasons, but I cannot imagine a more painful scenario for 2 little boys than that.
I mean, that was a terrible story.
I think any man that is brought up by men, in a household of men, loses something. There's a softness about a woman bringing you up. There's the cuddles and the kisses and the telling you you're wonderful and all that I think women are more apt to do than men are a bit, come on then, get on with it, you know, come on, son.
It probably hardened him. He was a very private person, but the one thing he wouldn't allow is his family to be harmed, and that was from his childhood. This is Greenend School, the junior school that John and I came to, or the school that John used to drag me to. Out here in the front are the playing fields of the school, and this is where John got the bug for acting, I think, because at the fete of a weekend, they used to have a talent contest, and he would jump on stage, do a few gags, a few impersonations, and sometimes he would win the contest. And most of the time, it was a 5-shilling prize and something like that. So John would win, and he'd say, Ray, come on, we've got 5 shilling. So we go to the local shops and buy some lollies and toffees, and it was a great time.
I used to go with Raymond and John to the Odeon. John actually was the entertainment during the children's Saturday morning cinema. One of the perks for Raymond and I, obviously, was that we got in free, because John was the star.
John, I and a couple of mates would do little walk-on sketches for the children that would last 5-7 minutes, and this was all inspired by John.
At home, my dad acquired a really old-fashioned microphone.
But he connected it round the floor, a piece of wire, to an old wireless. And we used to sit on this settee, all in a row. But John used to be under the stairs and be singing Lovely Bunch of Coconuts and all things like that. And he was very good singing all the Al Jolson songs. And it used to come out on the radio, and we used to clap as though we were at the theatre. It was really good.
For us young ones who were in the concert party, it was absolutely fantastic, and we did some superb shows. John came along with his brother Ray, who wasn't really old enough to join the youth club, but it was like, have me, have my brother. So we had his brother. And John, when he joined the concert party, liked to do mainly his own thing, in that he enjoyed doing an individual act, which was based very much on music hall. You know, roll out the barrel, I've got a barrel of coconuts, that kind of thing, but also telling lots of jokes, mimicking characters that we all knew, famous people.
John found some Olivia records of Laurence Olivier coming out with these Shakespeare plays, and it was just Olivia speaking. And I remember John, for hours and hours, would listen to Olivia speaking, sat down in front of this record player.
To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them.
John went on to Ducey Avenue Technical College, and there at that school they were doing more Shakespeare-type plays and stuff like that, and John really got the bug for it.
I used to do the running in the park, athletics. He would sit on a bench when it was sunny, under a tree, and read a poetry book.
I mean, had a mind and imagination that had to be fed.
He was always very good at acting, right from the first year.
I think he focused a lot of his emotion into his work. into his portraits.
But he was always taking one of the main parts, right from the first to the 5th year.
I must have said something about my schooling and how I didn't go to a very good school. I left at 15. And he turned on me and he said, "You don't know what a bad schooling is like, Sally. You have no idea what it's like to go to a school where you have the careers officer come into the room and ask you what you want to do. And you put your hand up and say, well, I want to be an actor or I want to be a solicitor, and you're told, well, there are 3 jobs down the factory and 2 at the market."
The school itself produced a variety of people, in business world. You would either be a policeman, a salesman or a burglar.
That was the most important experience for him, really. Feeling that your life was set out for you, was limited for you by the streets in which you grew up, and your horizons were not to be any wider than that.
The headmaster, Sam Hughes, I think he saw a talent that John had and said to John, "Why don't you try and become an actor? I mean, a professional actor." But John thought, well, you don't become a professional actor from where we come from.
And his dad said, "Oh, I don't know about that." So he said, "Well, I want to be an actor." But when he left school, he tried being a baker part-time. Then my husband got him an interview at the electricity board as an electrician.
But Sam, and along with a few people from the concert parties, encouraged him to try it.
But this, of course, meant training, it meant RADA, it meant getting grants, and here there were difficulties. John was 2 years too young, and about 4 or 5 subjects in GCE too light. But we rallied friends, packed the committee, and in the end, we got the grant. A bit of manipulation, but I think in the end, justified.
And I shall always be very, very eternally grateful to you, Mr. Hughes.
Thank you, Sam Hughes and John Lee.
But he felt he hadn't got any skills to help him get into RADA. So I offered to give him some lessons on presentation, particularly of poetry and of Shakespearean type things.
But the one thing Dad always said to him, "John, try it. If you fail, come back to Burnage. Ray and me are always here. So give it a go, make it your own. If not, come back and we're here waiting for you."
His dad one week said to me, if he's going to go to this place, he said, "I can afford him a new suit now." He said, "So will you take him for this suit? Because you always went with your children in those days for a suit." He said, "But do let him have what he wants." So we go to this outfitter's. And we're looking round. I said, "Oh, John, this is nice." He said, "Not for me." So we have another wander round. I said, "This is nice." "Not for me." He said, "And you did say my dad said I could have what I wanted." So he had a look and he said, "Oh, this is it." And I nearly died because it was this teddy boy suit. And he went and tried it and it looked awful. So he got it and we went home and his dad was home and he said, "Did you get him one then? Where is it?" And at the time they used to give you them in a cardboard box with a bit of a handle on. And so John brought this cardboard box out, he'd folded it back up again and put it in there. And when he went to try it on, I said to his dad, "Don't let your jaw drop when you see it. You did say he could have what he wanted." And when he came out, his dad said, "That looks fine, son." And it looked awful. And Tom Courtney pulled him to bits when the first time he saw him in it. Never stopped ribbing him about it, but he thought he was the bee's knees.
I remember we all went in my Uncle Charlie's van, John, I, my dad and Sandra. We all went to London to his RADA audition. And I will always remember I was a nervous wreck, not John, but I. And he came out and my dad said, "How did you go, John?" He said, "I'm not sure, Dad, but I think I've done all right." The one thing that happened to John when he did go to RADA, he was very apprehensive, obviously coming from Burnage to the big smoke and RADA and fellow actors and middle-class people who sent their daughters and sons there. So John found it very scary in that environment. And he was kept to himself purely because he didn't felt he could mix with those sort of people. But he met people like Tom Courtney, which helped him to break that ice. But he never felt comfortable at RADA with what he called middle-class Southerners.
But like a lot of people from his background, John is very, very determined and very pugnacious.
I can remember the first time I talked to him, because nobody dared talk to him. He looked so... But you see, he was only 16. He was very shy. But he didn't look shy, he just looked frightening. But I don't know, there was something about him that I just liked. And I remember I said something, and all he said was, I'm all right, I'm all right, I'm all right. But I persevered, and shortly he began to sort of actually say words back at me, and we became best friends.
And I remember him saying that after the first term at RADA in London, he went back home to Manchester and very nearly didn't come back. He just found the whole thing so alienating.
The top voice teacher at RADA was a man called Clifford Turner. And he had written books. He's dead now, bless him, but he was getting on there, and he was like one of the authorities in the theatre on voice. And one of the first things we as a class had to do was to get up and each read, and the boys and the girls, each read the prologue to Romeo and Juliet, which goes, if I remember, two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene, etc. And so he goes round all the different ones sitting in a circle, and he gets to me. He says, right, you. So I got up and I said, two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. And he said, I'll never forget, he said, oh, sit down, you'll drive me mad.
And I can remember one teacher telling John one day that he was unemployable because his arms used to go all over the place.
After about a year at RADA, John wrote to Dad say he was coming home for the weekend. And I'll always remember, it's Sunday, Dad said, John's coming home, ready to see us. So we waited, we cleaned the place up a little bit. There was a knock on the door, and Dad said, that must be John, right? So I opened the door, and there in front of me was John, but all his hair had changed, it was all brushed back. He had a little goatee beard, his accent had changed, the Manchester accent had gone, and there was a, let's say, a London Southern accent. And I just couldn't believe it, and I said, John, is that you? What have they done to you? But it was him, but they had changed him.
And I think he found his first year pretty tough going, but obviously at the end of it he said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to crack it, and indeed he did in a very big way, and won the major prize at the end of his third year.
All the young women in their first term or year were in love with either Tom or John, and I was in love with John. But I didn't know him then. I didn't meet him until 2 years later when I worked with him. I was already in love with Laurence Olivier, who wasn't of my generation. But John Thaw, I was absolutely knocked out. So when I walked in on the first day of rehearsals, I was, there was this leather-coated, jacketed, kind of, intense-looking, fascinated by theatre and by his craft. He knew much more about the theatre than anyone I'd ever met. He'd read Ibsen and Strindberg and Chekhov, and that was where I met John. And never looked back, as they say. He noticed me that time.
While we were still at RADA, I went to live in a huge maisonette in Highbury Crescent, and John joined me there. And that's where he discovered this strange music that I used to listen to, which became so much a part of Morse, and for which he always gave me credit. He got very fond of what's known, I don't think of it that way, but what's known as classical music.
Tom would bring in, something and say, John, you've got to listen to this. They'd all sit in the armchairs, complete silence. And then they'd start, conducting to whatever it was they were playing.
There was this Bach solo cello suite, I think the sixth one, and he was sort of lying on a sofa, transfixed by it. Are you all right, John? Just being moved by music. And he couldn't believe that all this stuff was there that he hadn't known about.
During the 60s, just before he married Sally Thaw, he was an incredibly hard-drinking, hard-wenching almost bankrupt young actor looking to make his mark and being left behind by people like Nicol Williamson, Albert Finney, Tom Courtenay.
He christened me Golden Bollocks at the time, because so much was happening to me that wasn't happening to him, but resentful or jealous, not a sign of it. I was best man at John's first marriage to Sally.
I had Abigail, I don't know, 18 months after we were married, and that was an extraordinary time of happiness. And I mean, he just adored his baby, and he was wonderful. And he always said he'd never change a nappy, and, you know, of course, you leave him alone with the baby and she needs her nappy changing, and within, you know, weeks he's changing nappies and doing everything.
Well, I look blooming comical, won't I, Will, in a pram down there? I mean, all the fellas along the front, they're going to have a blooming good laugh over it, aren't they? See me pushing a pram along, oh, coochie, coochie.
Hey, if you don't stop that, I'll chuck this at you.
A proper comedian I'll be. Pushing a pram with a squealing kid in it. Are you coming out tonight, Benny? Am I?
You wait!
Oh, getting violent.
John was working, he was doing so many television plays and little bits of film and so on. I mean, he wasn't an actor who ever stopped working. I think we separated because I was a young woman who didn't know what I wanted, and I think it's very difficult to be with someone who you don't know what you want. I wasn't very confident, and I didn't know what I was doing. It took the women's movement to focus me, really. That's why I think it's very sad that it ended. We were too young. We were children.
How are you finding it?
It's good. It's a good car.
The air conditioning's standard.
Mm-hmm.
Comfy seat?
Yeah.
It's an executive car with a sort of sports underneath, isn't it?
Mm. Thanks for the lift, mate.
Exclusively in OK Magazine, Big Brother Kate's summer fun with the girls. Plus, David and Victoria celebrate their new baby Romeo. And Hot Stars inside OK Magazine.
I look forward to
doing a lot more fishing.
I really look forward to summer in Italy. I look forward to summer in Italy.
Owning my own red 1978 Stingray Corvette.
I look forward to working less and living more.
I look forward to being called Dad, but not for a while.
Oh. 1 in 10 adults in the UK already look forward with AMP. AMP Financial Services.
Stretch the balloon like that. Ow! Some twiddly bits round here. A lovely, lovely curly tail. This one's for you. There are some laughing faces there, aren't there?
IMAC Warm Wax with Aquasystem. All you need is hot tap water and the results last up to 3 weeks. New IMAC Aquasystem with cotton flour. Feels smoother for longer.
Ever feel like you're surrounded by bad drivers, all pushing up your car insurance? Well, now there's justice. In the shape of eSure, where drivers with a 4 years no-claim bonus could get a real reward. See, there's the good, the bad, and the unbelievable savings of up to 30%. Call eSure on 0845 045 4000.
Colgate and the British Dental Association are making this September Oral Health Month. We're offering free dental health advice. So call Colgate now.
Velux roof windows, bringing light to life.
Can a grumpy old man be changed by the childhood spirit?
Grandad.
A granddaughter he didn't know he had.
And I don't have to eat vegetables.
Nothing remotely healthy need pass your lips.
The late John Thaw stars in Hidden Treasure, Wednesday at 8 on ITV1.
Although he was only 22 and very young when we made the series, in those days we took risks. We could take on somebody of that age and give them the leading role in a mid-evening drama series. And John was very effective.
I'm Sergeant Mann, SIV. I've come up from brigade.
And for me, John had an amazing stillness, an interior stillness, which gave him great authority somehow.
I think Red Cap established him as a star because in television, if you appear regularly on the screen in a series of, say, 13 episodes, people know who you are. And don't forget that we're talking, what, 30 years ago?
I was directing a stage play which was going to come into the West End, starring Sheila Hancock. And it was called So What About Love? And we were about 2 weeks before the start of rehearsal when the leading actor playing opposite Sheila just mysteriously disappeared. Nobody could find him, not even his agent. So there were panic stations, and who could we get?
They came up with this name, John Thaw, and I have to confess I hadn't heard of him. I really hadn't. But anyway, they said, and they were really thrilled about him and said, well, meet him. So I swanned in, West End star as I was at that time, and there was this sort of thing cowering in the corner looking kind of sultry and slightly sulky about the whole thing.
I wasn't particularly looking forward to the rehearsal starting the next Monday after the weekend.
We were desperate by that time, to be perfectly honest, so we had him. And he was wonderful. He hadn't done a lot of that sort of comedy at the time, but he really learnt as he went along. And I loved him. I thought he was great fun. I was married at that time, but I thought he was the most enormous fun, and not a bit like the first impression. I mean, during the run, we did discover that we had very similar backgrounds. I mean, we both came from working class backgrounds. And then I think the turning point for me, for John, that really made me, I suppose, in a way, kind of fall in love with him, although I couldn't do anything about it, was we were driving. He had a little MG, and that was another thing. We shared a love of cars. I had a Morgan, and he had an MG. And we went for a ride in Scotland when we were on tour with the roof down, and he put some music on, and it was Shostakovich. And it blew my mind. And he, this trendy young guy with the shirt undone and the medallion, you know, and the kind of bell bottoms, was mad about classical music, as was I. And then my first husband, became very ill, sadly with the same cancer that John eventually died of, and I looked after him for about a year, and then he died, and I met up with John again, not too long after that, through some mutual friends. And gradually, over the years, we started going out, and eventually we got married. And John had Abigail by Sally, his first wife. I had my daughter Melanie by my first husband, who died. And they started playing together, and I used to look after Abigail occasionally. And it was eventually them who said, look, we'd like to be sisters, why don't you get married? John says that I proposed to him. I think I probably did. I mean, one of the wonderful things was that I knew John would never have an affair. Having said that, probably all sorts of people will come out of the woodwork, but I knew because he was much too shy to make the first approach. He was much too terrified that people were going to say, on your bike, you know, because he had no estimate of his own attractiveness or his own talent or his own anything, really. He thought women left. And many's the argument that we had, and I used to say, I'm not going. Whatever you do, I'm not going. Anyway, I jumped on him, according to him, and we got married, and all the papers the next day said Sheila Hancock weds, and in the bottom there was this little picture of John. And then we had Joanna. So the two older girls were absolutely delighted to have a little another sister of their own. And John adopted Melanie, officially adopted her, so that she wasn't just a stepdaughter. So it's worked out terribly well, really. I think they probably love one another more than if they'd all been exactly the same parentage, because I think they think they're lucky to be with one another, really. He has had a household full of women, of course. There's 3 daughters, and at one point we had a female cat, and I think he did think that was a step too far. And he used to sometimes say, "Oh, God, I'm surrounded by women. I'm surrounded by women. Help me. Get out of my hair," and all that. But he liked it. They fussed him, and he really thought that was all rather nice.
He was terribly funny. I mean, that's the strongest memory, you know, that I have of him. He was a terribly funny man, wasn't he? He was a brilliant mimic. So he could do anybody instantly. Someone who just came delivering milk, someone or one of our various boyfriends. Yes, that was embarrassing, but... And he always had daft dances, silly dances.
But I have to say, he did the cooking a lot of the time. Did get quite grumpy sometimes if it didn't go well.
He was convinced he was absolute ace on the barbecue. This was a fatal mistake. And he had sausages that particular afternoon. He was trying to cook. And he couldn't light it. As he became more and more morose, more and more Mancunian, a lot of strange four-letter words arriving in monosyllabic noon. And he couldn't light it, so he hadn't got proper fuel. He thought he could just do it because he thought a brilliant cook. He had a gift. And we tried everything. We tried paraffin, we tried petrol, we tried gin, and it just didn't seem to ignite. But finally it did sort of flicker into life, and after another hour and a half, well, we knew what, you know, barbecues, if they don't light, hell, we got these sausages. And they were done, they weren't raw or anything, he'd done them beautifully, but of course, you see, the flavour of paraffin doesn't really go with sausages, and so it was a bit of a bleak meal.
But it was always quite funny that he was grumpy, you know, and that I think must have driven him mad, because sometimes he'd be so grumpy we would just laugh at him.
I mean, it's strange that he had all these women. I guess they helped bring him round to the idea that women were all right because they loved him so much. I mean, the great thing about our marriage was that he started off very suspicious and very defensive and very angry and all sorts of things. And I think he learnt to love. I mean, certainly the last months of his life, he was the most loving man you could have. And I think that was one of his biggest triumphs, that he was a boy who wasn't taught to love as a boy, but learnt to love as an adult. And I think to do that is a mega triumph.
It was a great anti-authoritarian piece, The Sweeney. It was full of anarchy.
We were left on our own, and it was a wonderful environment to be in. There were lots of laughs, lots of fun.
Get your trousers on. You're nicked.
And there was a very close relationship between the regular cast and the crew. Lots of parties, lots of people getting drunk. Having said that, you know, everyone turned up on time the next morning and did their stuff.
Here he is, Sir John Thaw.
Because I knew John, and because I knew he had this great sense of humour, as did Dennis, I tended to put a lot more humour into The Sweeney than other writers.
I'll give them this! I'll stun 'em, babe! Why, you can't miss! Just pin my star to a chart! Song's gonna come from the heart! Together now! Up you go! On, up! Nice!
Morecambe and Wise evidently were great fans of the Sweeney, and they asked if it would be possible for them to appear in an episode.
Who's there? Police who? Police, come in. Hello. How are you? I'm Eric. Come in and lie down. This is Ernie. He's with Interpol. Yes, how do you?
I'm Detective Inspector Regan.
Oh, yes.
This is my colleague.
Colombo, I've seen him. Gets a headache in the films. He goes, what's about like
Detective Sergeant Carter.
Ah.
We're from Scotland Yard.
Oh, yes.
It was a nightmare to do because, you know, John was a great comedian, really, and Dennis is funny, but, I mean, egged on by the other two, I mean, you'd walk onto the set, they'd be 4 hours behind schedule, and all the crew would be lying on the floor with their legs in the air.
Nobody knew who he was until the first episode of Sweeney, and then it was an overnight success, and he was a sex symbol. He's going, what? Oh, John, you're a sex symbol. It says so in the paper. Oh, no, shut up, don't be stupid.
You know, sort of man you would like. My mum probably fancied him.
He was astonishingly sexy, didn't wear it on his sleeve, very, very self-contained, but he had the most astonishing appeal.
When I felt very jealous about his appeal to these lovely girls who came around, and I was signing books. I mean, I wrote the wretched things. I thought that was perfectly proper. And this girl came along, and I said, what's your Christian name, my love, or something like that. And she said, oh, no, I don't want you to sign it, she said. I want John to sign it. And John laughed, and he said, win some, mate, and lose some, don't you? I remember that awfully well.
He had the most devastating blue eyes. And John would look into your eyes and, you know, turn your heart over. I'm sure he did that to every woman watching.
I suspect most women found something in John that they wanted to save or look after, because beneath this sort of quite stern exterior sometimes with John, and sometimes grumpiness, there was definitely a kind of softness and a vulnerability and a kind of heart of gold. And I suppose it's the mystery that people wanted to find out about him, and women fell for it completely and utterly.
And I've met women in their fullness of their age who love him. I've met young girls who love him. I've met men who love him. And that's extraordinary.
John started speaking and I started swooning. So we were sitting across the table at lunch and I was just leaning forward like this. And it cut, and then I'd sit back and it would stop. And then we did it again. We did another take, action. And I started swooning again because John's eyes were the most amazing blue and they would just open. And I was just diving into his face. And the director said, cut. And I said, God, John. I said, your eyes are amazing. I said, I'm just swooning into your face. And he went bright red and giggled.
This one's a real beauty. Take her up, Hank.
Forget the cowboys. You can now buy a fully guaranteed used car through the AA. And if you change your mind within 30 days, you can swap it for another. Call 0800 032 0932. Just ask.
Our ages are very different, but our number's the same.
Nice and Easy number 102. Light ash blonde.
Works with your own tones and highlights.
So you get the most natural color for you.
Which is truly the best color there is. Blonde.
Nice and Easy by Clairol. Color that fits you perfectly.
I don't mind getting older. I just don't want to look it. New Neutrogena Visibly Young is the only moisturizer to contain active copper. My dermatologist tells me copper is a natural mineral in your skin that helps keep it young looking. But as you get older, copper levels can fall. So to reduce the appearance of lines, use Visibly Young. For firmer skin, use Visibly Young. In tests, 100% of women showed visible improvements. New Neutrogena Visibly Young with active copper. It works.
Now there's a new Persil with added aloe vera to make your laundry bloom. And it's kind to your skin. New Persil aloe vera, a drop of nature, awash with kindness.
Aloe vera.
So, what have you got at school today? Football and maths.
Mums know it's the most important meal. Now, research agrees. A daily breakfast like Cheerios or Shreddies with complex carbohydrates releases energy steadily and helps kids concentrate.
So, how did you get on? Terrible. We lost 3-2 and I missed a penalty. Well, did your best.
Look for the complex carbohydrates logo on Cheerios and Shreddies.
Ashamed of your mobile? Then get the latest handsets with double minutes and double text on O2 at Phones For You now. We'll find the right phones for you.
This is no ordinary training.
36 hours of interrogation, humiliation, sleep deprivation, white noise and violence.
This is no ordinary job.
X-ray down in 1 echo.
Have that X-ray down in 1 echo.
Action returns to ITV1. Ultimate Force, coming soon.
Bernard Lawrence said, I've got this actor who's never really done comedy before. You're a director who's never really done comedy before. Why don't you have an adventure together? So I asked who the actor was told it was John Thaw. I said, I'll have some of that, please.
Hello. Yes? Remember me? Yes. I'm your son. I know. Are you going to ask me in? No.
A studio audience in a comedy show is very daunting. You know, there's an onus on you to make them laugh. And he used to say to me, I'd rather open a Shakespeare play at Stratford-upon-Avon 7 nights a week than do one of these things.
I'm Matthew. I know you're Matthew. I was at the christening.
I don't think John made a decision to do a role because he felt he could be successfully popular within it. I think he was, if you like, more selfish than that. I think it was, can I bring something to this part? You know, will it challenge me? Will I enjoy it? And that was an experience I had throughout his professional life. Those programs, films and so on I was involved with him. He always, you know, gave you a little bit of a grilling. I mean, not an unfriendly one, but an intelligent, perceptive and very professional one. When you know, he used to sort of shove a script under his nose and say, just pass this right for you, John. And he would, you know, he had that knowing smile, which he often used when he wouldn't necessarily yes or no, but he just sort of looked at you with a sort of wry grin on his face, as if to say, stop taking the piss, sunshine.
I'd read the scripts and I'd look at the character and I'd think, how's he going to play that? And I'd try and work it out in my mind. And when he'd come and do it, it was totally different. It was perfect, but totally different to the way I'd worked it out, and so much better.
He was the kind of perfect actor to work with because as long as you were clear, he would give you simply whatever you asked for. And it's not that he was pliant, it's just he was utterly committed to getting whatever it was right.
One could write almost anything at all for him, safe in the knowledge that whatever you did, he would be able to make it work.
He always said if a writer's sat up all night or sat around for a week
honing this script and that sentence, it was there for a particular reason that the writer understood and knew, and it was our job as actors to find our way through it.
He said he thought he was going to be okay with Chief Inspector Morse because in so many respects he felt very similar.
Underneath the surface, you felt there was a really troubled man, and this man cared terribly about life, not just about the particular or boring detective duties he was engaged on and the plot. It was somebody who had a philosophy, which was that life was sad, life was full of bad people, and that they had to be dealt with, and that was his job, but he was very unhappy about it.
I think John was intensely shy, and obviously it was a huge contradiction, though not necessarily an uncommon one, that he chose a profession that required self-disclosure. I think that he had, you know, gargantuan kind of emotions roiling around in there. You know, he had the kind of range, I think, of the great classical actors. You know, he could encompass rage, pride, obsessiveness, refusal to compromise. I mean, all of those characteristics were in Morse, for example. And then, of course, from the other side of his personality, you know, gentleness and self-deprecation, a very kind of wry sense of his own flaws was another quality he had. But he managed somehow to bring all of those things to Morse.
You'd see, especially I think when you saw the pieces of Morse and you'd see him listening to classical music as Morse, there was a kind of interior life going on which you just didn't know anything about.
The audience ratings for Morse went into the billions worldwide.
Sí, señor, pero si pudo haber matado a su vicedirector, también pudo haber eliminado a Ballarat por no haberle conducido a la cima de la gloria.
Può! Non voglio sentire altre ipotesi, Morse. Voglio dei fatti. Morse?
I'm sorry, sir. The jaw's still rather tender.
I think actors can be divided very, very generally into two sorts of people. Those that take say, what can I get out of this part, this role? And those that give say, what can I give this role? What can I do to help it? John was a supreme example of the second.
He had almost a third eye in his head while you were performing a scene. Most actors are just trying to get from one end to the other without drying on camera. With John, this third eye would tell him if it was getting boring or the scene was kind of subsiding, and he could engage a third gear, if you like, and it just took off like a rocket booster, this sort of oomph. And if you were working with him, you went, oh, right, oh, we're really in a scene here. And you hung onto his shirt tails and went along for the ride.
And I think the bottom line was, I didn't want to let him down.
He'd look into your eyes, and your response had to be truthful.
Susan.
I'm convinced he made other actors act well because of him.
If he appreciated you and what you were doing, he was fantastically good about making sure you were being appreciated. I remember doing a scene with him in Kavanagh, and we were in a cafeteria somewhere by the sea, and I had to cry in a scene, and we were sitting there, and you know, as ever, there was lots to do. So we finished the scene, and the crew started to move off. And John went, hang on, he said. That's not easy, you know, doing that. You don't just do that and move on. That was something.
If you did a good scene, everybody was happy. The great accolade that John gave me was, I think we nearly cracked that one, Jim.
That was just like real life, almost.
We'd got away with it.
You haven't been found out yet, loves. I'm off home. Bye.
He's able to look straight through the lens, right into the heart of the audience.
Someone like John can reach out of the screen and drag you into it and say, watch me.
Part of John's great technique was to be absolutely prepared, not just with the words, because, as I say, he always had his script under his arm, but when we did Mr. Tom, for instance, there were a group of skills he had to learn, only sufficiently enough, of course, to convince us on camera, but he had to play the organ, he had to clean knives, he had to do some roofing and build a chair. He would make sure that he had the right people around him to teach him how to do those things sufficiently enough to seem convincing, even when in Mr. Tom the chair fell apart. Oh, brilliant.
He knew
exactly what was going on when you were filming. He knew what lens was on the camera, so how much you were seeing. He knew exactly what he needed to do and what he didn't need to do, and what would read.
He worked here. He would sit for hours with his scripts, paring it down, paring it down, paring down. And I think that absolutely sums up his work.
I would occasionally do lines with him in the old days, reading the bits in between. I used to love doing that as well. I used to ask to do that, so maybe he was just doing that as a favour.
He didn't demonstrate, he didn't show off, he wasn't actory. He actually peeled it down to a centre of truth. And I think that leaps out of the screen to you. You can tell when people are pretending. And I think he didn't pretend. He actually became the character. And I think the combination of this face that the camera... I mean, there was a shot in the final Morse, which when I watched it, I found it very moving. But I also thought nobody but John could have quite held it. He's alone in his room thinking that he's resigning and, everything, the police job is over and where the hell is he, and he's alone and he hasn't got a woman and everything. And the camera pans in very, very slowly, very, very slowly. And John did nothing. He did nothing, but he just, God knows what was going on in his head. I mean, probably what was going on in his head was this was the end of Morse, and he was really sad about that. Any other actor would have been tempted to move the eye line or take a cigarette puff or take a drink or look out the window. No, just sat there. And that kind of simplicity, I think, works amazingly.
But I do remember him saying to me, always keep coming out of a different corner, always keep them guessing.
Most actors will find what is, the sublime in the character. And he went completely the other way. He was slightly perverse in that respect.
This is one of John's great strengths. His readings were so unexpected. They were so surprising, fresh, always. John came in as Doolittle, the dustman, to Higgins, I was, and said, I've been in Endell Street, Governor. Higgins says, in a public house, yes? And Doolittle's line was, yes, Governor, why shouldn't I? And that why shouldn't I is usually done as a kind of Wilfrid Lawson wheedle. Why shouldn't I? Not young Thaw. Thaw had, he was an intelligent man and a well-read man, and he knew what he was doing. He knew his Bernard Shaw. And he realized that underneath this wonderful levity, particularly in a light-hearted piece like Pygmalion, always with Bernard Shaw, there is this undercurrent of this detestation of the poverty, of the violence and degradation that poverty inevitably breeds. And his reading of the line of being in a public house, yes, Governor, why shouldn't I? And it was wonderful. It was just that little flash of the stuff that turns people into Marxists.
He could not bear sentiment. And that's why it was so moving. Because he didn't ever say, look how sad I'm being, or look how sad this is, and look at these real tears, and things like that. Tears would be the last resort. And that wonderful scene where he's talking to that boy, and he just says it.
You think you're the only person who ever lost anybody?
And he often used to say to me, if I was getting my knickers in a twist about a scene, he used to say, just say the words, kid. Just say the words. And if they're good enough, they'll carry you.
How do you think I felt, eh, when it happened to me? Not just my wife I lost, She was my best pal as well. My very best. And my lad. May not even here.
The Citroën C5 starts at just $11,995. And now with advanced HDI diesels from $12,995, you'll be laughing. The C5 from $11,995 until the 30th of September.
Hello, mate. Fancy coming over tonight for a bite? Love to. What are we having? Well, we thought you could help out there. Right, what you got in your fridge? Well, we thought you could help out there too.
All right, how much do you want me to spend?
30 quid?
Well, you owe me a fiver, so let's call it 25, eh? Ugh. So how many's coming then?
5, if you count yourself. Oh, and Mick and Sue are coming, and they're bringing their kids. And their dogs.
With 4,000 prices chopped and over 150 buy one, get one free offers, you get more than you expect for your money at Sainsbury's.
Here we go then, guys.
Great spread. Here's your 25.
Thanks, mate. Do you want some change?
No. You keep that. Can I wash those for you, sir? Madam?
We've gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure Surf removes 99 of the most common stains, including tea, strawberry jam and coffee. That's guaranteed clean, or your money back.
We can't all be experts in everything we do. That's why Abbey National have new mortgage specialists, dedicated to helping you get the mortgage that's right for you as quickly and easily as possible. Come into your local branch and talk to us about our great rates. Abbey National, because life's complicated enough.
Hi. Yeah, I'm having a problem with the XXX adult pay channel.
Right.
It's all just very, very fuzzy at the moment.
Right.
It's still going up and down quite a lot.
Ashamed of your mobile?
Ah, that's perfect.
Then get the Ericsson T66, one of the world's smallest phones at Phones For You now. We'll find the right phones for you.
Uh-oh, another breakdown. Bet you her washing machine's got limescale damage. Limescale's a big problem. It builds up on the heating element and everywhere inside the machine, so sooner or later, you could have a whole load of hassle. But just one little Calgon tap in with every wash helps block limescale build-up on the vital machine parts, so Calgon protects against limescale damage and breakdowns.
Washing machines live longer with Calgon.
When you're enjoying your main course, wouldn't it be great to get the rest of the meal thrown in for free? Well, this month at Burger King, you can. Simply buy a bacon double cheeseburger and we'll give you fries and a drink, absolutely free.
To fulfill a burning ambition,
A man like that always wants something.
he was prepared to do anything.
Mrs. Durand Deacon no longer exists.
Absolutely anything.
I destroyed her with acid.
An ITV1 drama premiere starring Martin Clunes. A is for Acid, Monday at 9.
John really needed people around him that he could trust. He didn't trust lots of people, to be perfectly honest. He was very suspicious. So he had to have his scallywags, as he called them, round him, which was his dresser and his stand-in and his driver and Pauline, who was continuity.
That originated from the Sweeney days.
Because we're always messing around, and he said, "You pair of scallywags."
That's it, yeah.
But I think it was his answer to the Rat Pack.
If they were on location, he would always go out with them, not anybody else, not the actors.
It's just wanted a normal night out with normal people. As far as we're concerned, I'm concerned, we're normal working people.
We were like his family when they weren't
An extension
there.
to his family.
Yeah.
They boosted him and they supported him and they understood him. And, you know, if things were going badly on set, as they do, they could almost make John laugh. And I think they probably got quite good at that. I think they knew how to handle his moods.
Me and Barry would then start saying little things just behind his back or in his earshot, and he wouldn't take any notice. Then we'd go on a little bit further and say it again, and then you'd get a little snirk from his mouth, and then we'd say, we've cracked it, pal. Then we'd go on again and he'd say, F off you two, driving me mad, go away. And then he'd be out of it.
Although I found Mr. Grumpy a bit quite entertaining in many ways.
He was never really Mr. and never really right down, but he was sort of in between.
In one of the Morses, he was, for reasons I really couldn't quite understand why, but he was very, very irritable and bad-tempered.
I never saw him grumpy, but he was unbelievably shy.
And I remember I christened him Inspector Morose.
He was an introvert and thoughtful.
Probably a shy extrovert. He had a difficult time as a child, and I think he protected himself as a result of it, and there was a wall of protectiveness that very few managed to break down, and it was something amazing that was inside, and you just had to batter at it to get to it.
Funnily enough, last night, one of my daughters burnt a tart and was in tears, as we often are at the moment, and she said, oh, if only Dad had been here. And I said, well, what would he have done? And she said, well, he would have laughed at it. He'd have cracked some joke and it would have been all right. He'd have made it okay. And he was wonderful. He had an extremely eccentric turn of humour. He would, I mean, honestly, it's quite unusual, isn't it, to be with somebody for 30 years and still be able to cry with laughter. I mean, he has had me crying with laughter.
Sorry, Mr. Proctor. One thing. You said you're really nervous because you've got to kiss me. And I said, I'm not. I'm not nervous. And of course, I was absolutely beside myself because this wasn't a peck on the cheek. This was supposed to be a long, lingering kiss. Happy birthday, gorgeous. And I said, it just seems the wrong thing to do. You're a national treasure, John, and you shouldn't be rummaged around with.
The 1998 Special Recognition Award goes to John Thaw.
John Thaw for Inspector Morse. John Thaw.
John almost hated the celebrity lifestyle, going to parties, going to first nights, going to awards, even going to awards, you know, where he was going to be awarded.
I learned that if you do get famous, never to be too boasty, or because he wasn't, and that's why everybody loved him so much.
John never sort of sought, I think, public adulation. I don't think it worried him. I remember him telling me once when he and Sheila had just moved to Chiswick in London. He went down to the off-licence to buy something. I don't know what it was, but the guy behind the counter said to him, oh, you're new here, aren't you? And he said, yes. And he says, there's a lot of important people moving in round here, you know. He said, we had that Sheila Hancock in here the other day. And John said, oh, did you? She's very good, isn't she? And he said, yeah. And he picked up his fags or whatever and went out.
I asked him whether he got pleasure when people gave him a pat on the back, as most people would. And he said, just momentarily, just like that. And then it was completely gone. And he said he thought the reason for that was that he'd always had this, he felt he'd always had this talent, and in his phrase, he hadn't honed it like an athlete. Of course, he'd refined it professionally over the years, but it was in the marrow, if you like, and so that when people said to him, well done, he thought, well, what for? It's what I'm able to do, it's what I do.
After the 5th year, we were out in Australia and he'd been given a CBE during the break between the 2 series, and he thought that was hysterical, and he used it right through the following series whenever he was put in an awkward position or had to say a line that he thought was a bit iffy. So, I can't say this, I'm a commander of the British Empire.
And bring your eyes back towards us.
The first day I met John, I was very, very nervous, and I came to the makeup room and I said, before he could say anything, I said, hello, John, I'm Claire. And he said, hello, Claire, I'm John. And I thought, oh, no, this is awful. That was the end of the conversation. But I was incredibly fortunate because my first line in the whole thing was,
Do you know where I might find a detective chief inspector? Looks like Mouse.
Morse. Detective Chief Inspector Morse.
And the first time I did it, the first rehearsal, there were about 20 policemen around, all the crew, Kevin and everybody else, and everybody laughed and laughed and laughed. And it was the most brilliant icebreaker. And from that point, John obviously thought, she's okay.
First met John in 1985 when I first left drama school. It was my first job in rep. My parents came to see the show. It was my first professional job, you know, after 3 years at drama school. And all I was like the door opened this far and I pushed a summons through and delivered it to them and then the door closed. I inadvertently told him that my parents were coming to see the show that night beforehand. And when all I had to say was, "This is your summons, please appear at various magistrates at this time." But it was said through a door with that much gap, yeah? Anyway, my parents are in the audience, front row. Of course, I bang on the door goes wide open, he says, "Come in, officer." I tried, I couldn't say a word. And there he was, twinkling, looking upstage at me, going, "Welcome to the professional theatre, Mr. Kemp."
You'd best come in then.
It's a great thing with these. We both had chairs with our names on them, and they were put into this warm room into the house, so we were both warm. And one of the guys in the crew kept taking it out, thinking that John didn't want me in there because I might start annoying him. And John kept putting it back in to make sure I was warm, because all I had on was these little T-shirts and shorts.
I'm always very grateful to John personally, because he was cast in the leading role in my play, We'll Support You Evermore. And the day before we were meant to start shooting, the director's father fell ill and she had to give up, and the producer asked me if I'd like to take over. So it wasn't until we were on the plane going to Belfast that I had to tell John, "I'm sorry, you're not being directed by one of the leading directors in the country, you've been directed by me." But he took it very well indeed and treated me, I think, like he would have treated any other director. On the very first day of the shoot, I was terribly nervous behind the camera. Roll the cameras, get the clapper boy in, shot one, take one. I stand there waiting. Nothing happens. After a moment, I say, "Something wrong?" John says, "You haven't said action, Doug."
After the read-through, John took me aside and he said, "I think you're terrified of me." And I looked at him and I nodded. And he just gave me the most reassuring smile and a wink. And I just melted. And that was it. Any anxieties, any nerves, just disappeared.
He was an immensely generous man, and he never forgot his roots. He never forgot the fact that his own career was finally brought to fruition in study terms at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art because he got a grant, because he got a scholarship, a bursary, which he couldn't have attended, rather, without that help. And whenever he got a major contract for whatever it was, principally on television, he would put a portion of that, not enormous, but a very significant proportion of that, into the bursary funds and the building funds at RADA.
I think he was a victim of his own success. He was so good in the roles he played in things like the Sweeney and Morse that the broadcasters wanted him to go on forever, and I know he often had to fight his way out. All sorts of inducements were made to him to stay playing a part, and he would say, "Look, I'm terribly sorry, I've just done enough, I can't give any more to this."
The final death of Inspector Morse in the main quad at Exeter College. He had to keel over on the lawn. Camera was set up, turned over, jammed. The crew went off to check the camera. Camera was perfectly well. Jammed again. Take 2. Take 3, it jammed again. Take 4, it jammed again. Take 5, it jammed again. No one could understand it. They got the final shot on take 6. Now this is really peculiar. because we've never had any trouble with the camera for years and years and years. And there's one shot they had of Inspector Morse dying in front of their camera, and he didn't want to shoot it.
Drunk? Bit early in the day.
I think the prospect of John playing Monsignor Renard, a Catholic priest in France at the beginning of the Second World War, appealed to him greatly. I think it came at the right time. The notion of the part was that in this demoralized and bewildered small town, that the local pastor would become, if you like, the moral leader of the community. And John warmed to that very much. That was something that I was very excited about doing, because I could see this was probably the strongest television role that John would play in terms of the demands it made on him and his attitudes. And I know he enjoyed the opportunity to play, if you like, more limited roles, certainly in the theatre and cinema, but also in television, in films and two-part series.
What I now have to say, let every man take very good notice of, for I will answer to it in England. Yea, and before Her Majesty.
I've been proud of him every day of his life. I was proud the day he was born. I was proud the first day he toddled and the first day he talked. I was proud of him every day of his life. What's this special pride just because he's dead?
I knew a properly equipped and trained bomber force would save this island from blockade, and was the only means of taking the war to the enemy should it happen. And now it's happened.
1, 2, 3, 4. 32, 33, 34. 72, 73, 76. 100.
Week 32, and we give our castaways a treat. The new Ultima, Hotpoint's most advanced washing machine ever. Plus a box of Persil 2-layer tablets. With just one set of clothes each, we felt they needed freshening up. The results please everyone.
That's its leg. Can you see there? That's the hand.
It's so beautiful.
Amazing. So, are you looking forward to the big day?
Yeah, very excited.
Subject to the following terms and conditions: no pain, no stretch marks, no varicose veins, returning to part-time work, buying house at 32 Petunia Crescent, baby not inheriting father's nose.
Because people everywhere have small print too, your local HSBC is offering a face-to-face discussion to help you plan for the future. The Individual Review from HSBC, the world's local bank.
Got to have more!
Great news for all you crust freaks. Hovis Krusty. Soft white bread with a delicious crusty crust.
Yes!
Part of the great new range from Hovis.
I was a superb actor in every direction.
I think every actor likes to do films, but because of John's success with Morse and all the other television things he was doing, it meant he was never really available for movies. For instance, I can remember a time when Robert Redford's office called in because they wanted John to play the father of Brad Pitt in a film called A River Runs Through It. And when I said, I'm sorry, he's not available for those 7 weeks because he's doing an episode of Inspector Morse, they could not accept that. Oh, come on. You cannot be serious.
What I felt was that on occasion he needed to be challenged because he was capable of so much further, in-depth characterisation, etc., etc.
My God, man, I know all about Steve Beaker.
Minister, I don't understand why he's banned. You need a black leader you can talk to.
Look, I don't need to tell you, this country has a special kind of problem. Shit, man, do you think I like banning and detaining people without trial? I'm a lawyer. It goes against the grain.
I'd said to him, you played a horrible character in that, why did you do it? And he said 2 things to me. The first thing he said was, I did it because I felt it was an important story and I wanted to be part of telling that story. And the second thing he said was that you can't give a character redeeming features if they don't have any. So you have to be true to the character. He didn't want people to like him just because they were his audience, They had to accept the person he was playing.
And now on BBC One, A Year in Provence. I tried screaming for help, Lewis, but they all spoke French.
The British public didn't take to it. It hurt him, but John's reaction to that was to take himself off, which he did. And he left television for a year. He went to the National Theatre and did The Absence of War.
You can have talent, but if you have talent without character, then it amounts to nothing. John had that moral authority, which is why he was brilliant at playing policemen and lawyers, authority politicians.
I will not let one of you down. I will not.
I'd like him to have had a go at Lear. He was talking about it.
He was playing Cardinal Wolsey, who was a working man in the Court of Kings. And there was something about John which was a working man in the Court of Kings in his professional life. When the fall from grace happened in that particular play, he was able to tap on something which was about class difference, about the pain of being displaced. And there was something in him which came back from his origins and in his background that I could recognize that he was tapping into.
I've had loads of letters from people that saw him in his old days at Liverpool Playhouse and latterly when he did the Arthur Miller play at Manchester Exchange. I mean, somebody wrote to say that at the end the curtain came down and the biggest compliment any audience could pay, there was about 2 minutes silence. They were so moved by it before the applause started. So he was a very, very potent stage actor. However, having said that, John wasn't ashamed to be a television actor. There's a terrible snootiness within the profession. John never had that. He always realised the potency of television.
We've got to realise that we just don't belong in a theatre anymore, for that matter in a cinema anymore. Television is a part of our lives, and acting for television is very important. And he found this, like Dennis Potter wrote for television, John acted for it. He had something that just fitted that form. He demonstrated he could act both in cinema and on stage. He could have done all those things, but he did do this.
In a sense, he limited himself, possibly, by sticking with the tellies, but I think in his heart, he had an idea of himself playing King Lear and imagine his Malvolio, the malcontent.
He was a shy man, and something in his shyness also didn't quite believe in his own talent, and I think that was both endearing and attractive about him and provided him with a kind of humility when he did work. But in a way, it sort of tugged at his feet. It held him back sometimes.
Even when John was giving wonderful performances and tremendous accolades about what he was doing, John would come back and say, hope I got it right tonight. Hope I did. I think I might have done. And but he didn't. Don't think he knew how good he was.
He was lucky with his parts. He was lucky to have a team of people, Ted Childs and all sorts of people that have nurtured his career in absolutely the right way. And he would be the first one to say that. has been a lucky guy that people who right at the beginning, like Troy Kennedy Martin and all those sort of people, saw this special thing that he had.
And he had a beautiful house in the country and surrounded by big high brick walls. And one day he said to me, "Ray, come and have a walk in the garden with me." Anyway, when we were walking on the lawn, he said to me, "Ray, remember Burnage?" I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "You know, I had a dream that I didn't tell anybody about. And the dream was that one day I was going to have a beautiful home with a beautiful garden and brick walls all round so nobody could see me, and I was safe and protected." And he said to me, "That's what I've achieved. That's my aim, and that's what I've got right now."
He loved it. I mean, this house, John often used to sit here and say, "We cracked it, kid. We cracked it." I mean, it was very important to John, coming from the background he did, and I suppose to me, to have lovely things. Oh, and the lovely grandchildren. Joy of my life. He was a bit frightened of the grandchildren. A bit frightened that they might tell him where to get off. I mean, it is the best time to having grandchildren. It really is. And John enjoyed it.
It gives me special pleasure then to award the BAFTA Fellowship to John Thaw. I was very pleased that I gave him his BAFTA Fellowship Award, and we had a reunion. We resolved to see more of one another and speak to one another on the phone, which we did. But and the last conversation I had with him, his voice was weakened by the cancer, so I didn't like to pester him too much. And then he took me back again to our early years of joking. We both had known this very camp musician who used to speak in a very strange and affected way. And one of the things he used to say was, "Let's commit telephonage." and John reminded me of this. It was the last thing he ever said to me. He said, "I tell you what, Tommy, we'll commit telephonage." And we never did anymore. But it was a sweet little note to go out on.
I feel like I've lost a brother more than anything else, because he was very loyal, genuine, looked after you.
On one of those things, none of us had a chance to say goodbye.
No.
The last year, I mean, including the time that we've been in mourning, but then the illness lasted 9 months. And what happened was we did a recording of Peter Pan. John sang for the first time. It was absolutely wonderful. And then I was on location, and I came back a fortnight after we'd finished the thing, and his voice was playing up a bit, and I said, "Your voice hasn't got any better," because we thought it was because of the singing, you know, because he's not used to it. And he said, no, it seems to be getting worse, kid. So I said, "Well, why don't we go and see somebody about it?" Anyway, we went and saw somebody about it, and that was it. I mean, immediately they looked down his throat and said, "One of the vocal cords is paralysed and something must be causing it," and then x-rays and God knows what else, and they discovered that he had quite extensive cancer. So, bit of a shock, and then the treatment started, and he was just amazing. I mean, he opted to have treatment because he believed, you know, that he was told that it couldn't be cured, but it could be kept in remission. Which is, as I said to him, all cancer is. I mean, my cancer is in remission, and one hopes that the remission is going to be a long, long while, you know. Unfortunately, because I've been through it several times, I was able to make the right sort of noises, I think. But he was just wonderful. I mean, he had a rough time. Not agonizing, but rough. And he just ignored it. I mean, John had this ability, and I think this probably stems right back from his mother leaving him. If something didn't please him, he could not look at it. He could turn his back on it. And that's what he did with his mother. He did not choose to ever forgive her or find out about her. He did see her once, but he didn't like her. And he could just go and walk out of it, you know? And it stood him in very good stead with his illness, because, you know, I'd say to him sometimes, God, you're going through it, aren't you? And he said, I've got no choice. And that was his attitude. And it made it very easy for everybody around him, because he wasn't moaning. He never moaned. He never moaned. And in fact, I had a letter the other day from the oncology department saying that all the nurses said he was the nicest patient that they had ever nursed. Ever. But, you know, gradually the wretched thing began to spread, and but still he didn't. I mean, the night before we walked around this garden, and he was hanging on a bit, but he was still well strong, and you know, and we had a Lancashire hot pot, and which he suddenly wanted, and then that night, in the middle of the night, one knew that things were going downhill. I mean, I had been warned that it would only be a matter of days and weeks if we were lucky. And John had, but again, chose not to hear it. Signed a contract for ITV the day before. I found it on the piano, another year's contract. That's how much he did not want to take it on board. Now, people say, oh, he knew really he was protecting you. John didn't protect me. I mean, I'm the one person in the world that John was always, you know, straight with. And if he'd have needed to, if that had been his way of dealing with it, he would have talked about it. We only had one slight weep together at one stage, but even then he didn't talk about it. We just hung on to one another. But I, you know, towards the end, people kept saying alarming things that might happen, but I took the risk because I knew he'd want to be here. So I came down armed with all sorts of wonderful drugs and things, and with the local doctor on call, and he died here. And that's what he would have wanted. And the children were here, and the grandchildren were here, and this was what he worked for. This was what he loved. This was when he was himself. He wasn't Morse, he wasn't Sweeney, he wasn't any of the things that the public thought he was. He was a husband and a father and a man. And that's what he was when he died, you know? Much missed, I'm afraid. Much missed.
Can a grumpy old man be changed by the childhood spirit?
Shaken, not stretched. Not stretched. Not stretched.